G6S, what is it? What does it look like? How do you test for it and prevent it? We're going to talk about that and more in today's video. Hello and welcome to Lost Willow Farm. Today we're going to be talking about the G6S in goats. So if you're raising goats, especially if you're doing the Nubians or Nubian crosses, you're going to want to know what G6S is. It can cause financial loss, emotional distress, and a loss of reputation if you're breeding goats with the G6S. So let's get into it. Today here we're joined by Fern, one of our Nubian goats that we have here at the farm. And she's going to learn all about G6S as well, aren't we? Yeah, she loves scratches. So what is G6S? Well, it stands for G6 sulfatase deficiency. It was first discovered in 1987 when they tested a bunch of different goats, and they actually really only found it in the Nubian breed and their crosses. About 25% of the Nubians they tested were carriers at the time, so it's relatively widespread throughout the breed. Basically what happens is it causes a deficiency of the enzyme required to break down the sulfatide molecules. Those molecules then will build up in cells and cause cell damage. It particularly likes to attack the nervous system, which is why we see most of the symptoms as nervous system symptoms. So what symptoms will you see with G6S? Well, it's kind of tricky. In general, it's a failure to thrive situation. It could be poor growth, motor control issues, nervous system issues. It could be they're blind, they're deaf. In general, it's early death. That's why a lot of times if breeders don't know about this situation, they might contribute to something else entirely. That's why awareness of G6S is so important, because we can breed it out of the breed and don't have to deal with it anymore. So basically, with G6S, sometimes the kids are actually even born dead from the deficiency. Most often though, they die within the first weeks to months of life after just kind of having issues. They get worse and worse and then they die if they're not already euthanized. Sometimes though, they can live for a couple of years, which is when it actually becomes even more of an issue, especially if those animals breed. And it really just varies from case to case. That's why testing and knowing about it is so important. I actually reached out and talked to a couple of breeders who've actually dealt with affected G6S goats and kind of see how what they saw happen. One breeder I talked to, she accidentally created a affected buckling kid. Up until the 6 months that she had him, he was perfectly normal. He looked normal, he acted normal, grew great. The only reason she even knew that he was affected is because she happened to test him. He actually ended up going to auction for meat, so we never really knew what happened to him in the end. Another breeder I talked to over at the Running River Dairy Goats, really well documented case on her goat named Diva. Diva was an affected goat. She had 2 copies of the G6S deficiency. And honestly, for the first year-ish of life, it looked like she was perfectly normal. I have some pictures we're gonna post that show her at 1 month and 4.5 months old. Looks like a perfectly normal, healthy goat kid. However, the disease did kind of progress. She lived to be about just shy of 3 years old. If we look over here, you can kind of see the progression of the disease. So you can see she started losing body condition, body conformation started getting poor, she had poor stature. If you actually look at the middle picture, you can kind of see how much more narrow she is than the same age Nubian doe. That's called being slab-sided. That's just from poor growth, basically, from the deficiency. She did unfortunately pass away. Again, I think she was just shy of 3 years old when she passed away. That's what happens with this, is you see early death and poor performance while they are alive. If you are curious about more about Diva and want to see the rest of the pictures and how all happened, I will include a link to their blog posts down in the description below. So how exactly do you test and prevent G6S? Well, it's actually pretty simple nowadays. You can just do a DNA test and know if a goat is a carrier or not. It's an autosomal recessive inheritance, so it's pretty simple. The normal state is represented by an N, and the affected state is represented by a G. So if they're homozygous in N, they're considered normal and clear. They do not carry G76. If they are heterozygous and are in G, they're going to be considered a carrier. And if they are homozygous GG, they're considered affected. And so these are the goats that will be suffering and die in early death. So as I said before, it's a relatively easy DNA test to know if a goat is a carrier or not. We use the American Dairy Goat Association for our tests, as that we are a member, and that's what we use for our registry. It's just you send in a hair sample, and after a few weeks, you know what the results are. We're actually going to be making a video about that, how to collect a hair sample for DNA testing, if you want to use it to test for G6S or other purposes. So once you have the results back, it's pretty easy to know what to do next. So main thing is just do not breed 2 carriers together, ever. Ideally, honestly, you wouldn't even breed carriers at all. You'd only breed clear, normal goats together at all. Obviously, it's not realistic for everybody, so obviously, just at minimum, don't breed 2 carriers. What happens when you breed 2 carriers is that 50% of their offspring will come out of carriers, 25% of their offspring will be affected, so die early, and the other 25% will be clear. If you breed a clear goat to a carrier goat, 50% of their offspring are carriers, and 50% of their offspring are going to be clear. With both those pairings, it's not ideal, as you do have to test the offspring still to know if the offsprings are carriers or not. If you were to breed 2 clear goats together, the kids are going to be considered clear by parentage. If they don't carry it, you don't have to test for it, so it saves you money and time. You never, never, never want to breed an effective goat. Every single one of their kids are either going to come out as carriers or affected, and we don't want that. So that wraps up our discussion on G6S. I hope you've learned something about this video and that you take what you've learned to help improve the Nubian breed. Let's work together as breeders to bring that 25% carrier rate that they found in Nubians when they first discovered it to even lower amount, and hopefully get it to 0% one day. Test your stock, breed appropriately, and if you're buying new Nubians, ask the breeders for the results. They should be glad to show them and be proud to be breeding appropriately to remove this from the Nubian breed. Like we mentioned before, we're going to be making a video about how to send in the DNA samples for this disease. Keep an eye out for that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time on the farm.